Good afternoon. My name is Sal Ansara, and I am a senior advisor with Bank Director. And welcome to our What Directors Need to Know series. Today, we're going to be discussing artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence is impacting banking. Today, when we look at artificial intelligence, we look at it as the future. I have news for you folks. It's not the future, it's today. A little piece of information that I've come across in the last few days. Bank of New York has affected 70% of their back office operations with the use of AI, has decreased their personnel by 20%. Bank of America, their little gnome known as Erica, handles 98% of all routine transactions, 700 million transactions in the last year. We've got some catching up to do. They have a bigger back office, I understand, but there's some things that we can work on. I got a couple of things that we got for housekeeping. So today we want to have an open conversation. And so if you have any questions, there is a little icon on your computer that'll show, looks like a bubble, and it's available for you to put in questions, and we'll attempt to answer those questions. Please note that within 24 hours, you'll get an email saying that this webinar is available for view. And if you have any technical issues, please also use that Q&A button. Someone from the Bank Director team will try and give you a hand. Joining us today, we have two great speakers. Kurt Goering, who's the CEO of Decatur Bank. He's already jumped in and grabbed the bull by the horns and started implementing AI strategies. And so he'll help us understand what is being done in his organization. And also joining us is Cory Kronheim, who's the CEO of SM Advisor and my former partner at Crow, who helps institutions with their implementation, trying to do in the attempt or in the execution of developing a responsible and repeatable performance. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. And I'd like to start off with Kirk, since you've already grabbed the bull by the horns. Kirk, what made your team decide AI was worth exploring versus waiting on the sidelines?
To be honest with you, Sal, we kind of lucked into that decision. I've been going to conferences, I do every year for the last several years, and they've been talking a lot about data aggregation and the need for community banks to catch up in that space. So we started about a year and a half ago on a mission to understand our data, to try to aggregate that data, and to basically, we started trying to use it for creating sales opportunities. So those discussions started, and the very first thing we tackled was kind of a data infrastructure. How are we going to aggregate it? How are we going to get access to it? And to be honest with you, that those discussions led us to obviously the next likely step of how are we going to get access to that? How are we going to get the information from our data, which eventually led to using BA, using AI. Ultimately, we landed on AI as that source, if you will. And then, of course, that unintentionally made us sit down and just kind of discuss what's feasible, what's possible. And just to be honest with you, I didn't at the time really understand AI or what it could actually do with the power of our data infrastructure behind it. And then as we started kind of looking at that, not only did we decide, okay, this could be a really powerful thing to drive sales and to drive revenue, but it could really be a strong tool for us to use for efficiency measures. And we literally started looking at everything from personal efficiency down to vendor replacement strategies, to be honest with you.
When you say vendor replacement strategies, how do those conversations start with your vendor to figure out, as you point out, it's new. So we don't know what they have and what they don't have. How did you start that conversation with the vendor to figure out what tools or how your thoughts would work with their tools?
Yeah, we looked at that actually a little bit differently than I think what you took as my comment. So, Community banks have historically been plagued with a new regulation coming down the line. We don't have the back office to create the technology to deal with that regulation. So we go on board a vendor to handle that one issue. So what we're actually looking at doing is actually creating our own software and not using those vendors anymore, if that makes sense. And so we think the sky's kind of the limit there. Now,
Mm-hmm.
granted, years ago, for us to replace a vendor, we would have to have a back office team, a group of data programmers, data analysts. Small community banks don't have that. AI brings those tools to the forefront. So, we're actually looking at it on the front end a little bit more heavily on gaining efficiencies and being more profitable, of course.
There are a lot of CEOs who are in seats just like yours, and they start there. How do I start? How did you just? I know you said you're talking about the efficiencies, but how did you prioritize?
Yeah. It's a great question, and one that I've actually felt myself. We had kind of a unique situation in the fact that we've got an operations officer, a chief operating officer, and an IT manager that kind of took a love for AI, had that AI aha moment before I did. They were kind of bringing it to the forefront, but we really didn't know where to start. It looked really chaotic. It almost led me to believe, hey, we need to let some other people jump into this first, and then we'll come in and look at it later. And again, through that using data for sales process, getting that aha moment that I had really for efficiency. The very first thing we did, and Mr. Cory Kronheim is on here, is a good friend of mine and was our CPA partner for a period of time. He kind of opened my eyes a little bit to what AI could be and what it is and what it isn't. And so the very first thing that we did is we sought help from an outside advisor, which was Cory. Um, Essentially, it was a small cost in the overall scheme of things, but he helped provide value in areas that, to be honest with you, we didn't even know that we needed help in. Brought questions to the forefront that, to be honest with you, we didn't even know to ask. And so, that's the very first step I would say, whether it be Cory or someone else, get someone to help you. This is not what we do as bankers every day. This is not the way we think. Get somebody that can come in and challenge you. And that was the very first thing we did. The second thing, I think, again, we lucked into this, is you got to develop a data infrastructure. I think this is crucial. For us, the process of using data for sales, we built that infrastructure before we ever even started asking questions about AI and what it could do for us. So we have our data. It's housed in a central location, and we can access that using our tool. I think that's crucially important. It takes AI from being something that can be used for menial clerical tasks to something that you can significantly use. Again, our vendor replacement strategy, without our data aggregated, it would be impossible. Number three, develop your strategic plan and governance model. Cory actually helped us do that. We knew we needed a strategic plan. We knew that we were going to have to deal with governance at some level. Cory brought that really to the front of the process, not the back. A lot of times we, as bankers, get started in something and then develop a strategy after we learn about it. That's a bad plan for AI. You got to bring that to the front end. Develop your strategic plan. Develop your governance model. Cory did that for us. And to be honest with you, I think probably, although I don't like to say nice things about Cory, especially in public, was the biggest value that he brought to us was he literally made us sit down and discuss these things as an executive management group. Number four, we divided our staff and we trained them into stages. And one of the questions below, I'll kind of address how we actually divided them out. The number one thing we did is we allowed for time for productivity build. So I truly think that AI can help us all do something faster, quicker, and more accurately. Every one of us does something every day that AI can help with. We allowed for that to take place at our senior management team first. We train them first. And again, I'll go into that a little bit more later. And our goal was, again, to get our top executive management, our senior management team to buy in on the front end. And then lastly, develop your KPIs, track and monitor your program and your governance performance. To be honest with you, Cory suggested this early on, and I pushed back. I'm not a big fan of useless KPIs that take a ton of time to measure, and you got to have a whole staff to just do your KPIs. He kind of challenged me and pushed me on this. And in retrospect, it's probably one of the most powerful things we have today. We can look back today and we can see every use case and where it arrived, where it went through our governance process, and what it's doing today. Those are our 5 steps. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cory, Kirk's rattled off a number of steps. What do you take away that other community banks should come across on these things? Other than they should pay you $20 for such a great statement from Kirk.
Well, thank you very much, Kirk. I appreciate that. And I want to get to your question, but first, I want to level set for everybody that's on this call. Everybody that's going to be watching this webinar. Kirk, can you just describe the size of your institution, just very quickly, assets, number of people, and then the number of people that when you were getting started with this had a really thorough understanding of AI inside and out. So assets, number of overall employees, and then how many true AI experts were there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Our bank today is about 330 million. We have about 55 employees. About 8 years ago, we were a $90 million bank, so we're rapidly growing, moving into new territories. The number of employees that truly had knowledge of AI, Cory, I may give it 2, one of those not being me.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to level set there is because AI doesn't have to be this massive transformational change. You said it earlier, AI, and I constantly reiterate it, AI is chaos. And within banking, we don't do well with chaos. And so a lot of the organizations that I work with don't get started because they have no structure around that chaos. And so what I want to go back to, just thinking about the things that Kirk just mentioned, he said 5 things that really focused on the foundational skills, the foundational infrastructure that was necessary to get started. He didn't go off and say, there's specific use cases, there's new products I need to purchase, there's these massive transformational changes. He had some general ideas around the sales, but really he broke it down to 5 things. He said, have a trusted advisor, set your data infrastructure, have a strategic plan and governance, enable your people, and measure success. None of that is diving into, okay, I know how it's going to change the entire organization. And I think that's what really helps to get started, is to take a step back and just say, we just need to build some groundwork. And then really the rest just falls into place.
So where do you start? Where do you usually recommend they start, Cory? I know that Kirk pointed out that you wanted to get the cart put the horse before the cart, but from a practical standpoint, where is a great starting point for someone thinking about going on this journey?
The very short answer is that just about every bank I go to gets started using Microsoft Copilot. They use Microsoft Copilot because they're within an Azure environment, which is Microsoft's environment. They feel safe and secure. And really what it comes down to is you need to operate in a level of your circle of comfort. Leadership should not be going into AI without understanding that they've mitigated for the risks that are in place. That's the auditor and me coming out. We have to make sure that that circle of comfort is where we're sitting, because it's going to grow really quickly, the way it did for Kirk and the way it's done for a lot of the other banks that I've either worked with or interacted with. And so starting at a place where you're comfortable is key. Now, I said Microsoft Copilot. By no means am I saying that's the only place that you should be. I think that a lot of organizations just naturally feel comfortable there. But I have other organizations that use just about every one of the LLM platforms and use varying degrees of their data as they're going through it. What I would say, that's the just practical dive into that type of a platform. If I think more strategic, if you go and you look into anything that McKinsey's written or Boston Consulting Group or any of the large advisory firms, they all say that CEO buy-in is what drives AI success. And I don't feel confident in many organizations where their CEO isn't understanding and feeling like they need to use AI to some level. I'm not saying they need to be an AI wizard. I'm not saying that they need to be transforming what they're doing, but they need to understand how it works, because this is a type of technology unlike anything we've come across, and it's sprawling throughout organizations. And unless the CEO, who's the key risk manager of the organization, can really just have a general understanding of how it works and honestly leverage it as an AI thought partner, that's not going to support an organization's growth, enablement, and just overall adoption. So start with a platform you appreciate and make sure your CEOs dove in headfirst into it.
So you brought the CEO up. I'll bring the book since this is directed towards directors. When does the board get involved in the conversation, and how do you educate them, or how do you put the fishing line out in order to get their buy-in on execution?
So, Kirk, I'd be interested in just how you've described what you're doing to the board. What I would say is that um, board members need to get to their moment where they understand how AI works at its very core level, how we can take advantage of it for these productivity gains that you're seeing all over the place or you're hearing about all over the place. And the only reason I say that is because we need to be able to weed through the hype and what's actually real. Now, there's a ton of ways that AI can completely change the way we're doing business. But for you individually, you have to get to what I call your smile moment. Kirk said it was the aha moment. You need to get to that moment where you say, okay, because I finally get it, I can understand how this is going to personally impact me. And so now I'm starting to understand a little bit more, and I'm starting to get interested, and I want to dive more and more and more into this. But as far as being able to understand risk, to perform your oversight functions, and to be able to steer management, you need to be encouraging management and the executives to provide that education to you. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to spend hours upon hours upon hours diving into the tools, but you should be able to just have the foundational tools. Like, you should be talking to your AI platform instead of typing to it. You should be personalizing your profile. There's some very rudimentary foundational skills that really just change your entire interaction with AI, and that's what you should be pushing management to be able to support you with, so then you can do your oversight functions appropriately.
So, Kirk, when did you let him in on
So,
the
Kirk,
game?
Yeah, I was going to say all great advice there, Corey. Very front end. When we started feeling like, hey, this is somewhere we want to go and something that we think is going to be very beneficial, we brought them in from the very beginning, just in simple conversations, just in board conversations. We made sure that anything that we handed them is in plain language. One of the biggest stretches for me, and Corey's going to smile when I say this, I'm not an IT guy. I don't understand a lot of this jargon. I wanted to make sure that we used very plain English. So, I mean, we literally put together um, memos that go to the board almost on a quarterly basis that starts out with a plain English guide for senior management and board of directors. So we ensure that we're talking in very simple terms. And then we focus our efforts and our communication to our board to what we really think they would be interested in. I also serve as a board member. What's my biggest concern as a CEO and a board member is safety and soundness. How are we doing this in a safe manner? So our very first memo we put together, I've got it pulled up. It's titled "How We Use AI Safely" in a plain English format, and it details what systems we're using and why we think they're safe, our data infrastructure and the communication between our models and systems, why we think that's safe. We use very simple terms that not only our board can understand, but we believe regulators and auditors, once they start coming in and looking at this, they can understand as well.
And
You,
Sal, just to jump in there for a second, one of the questions that popped into the Q&A was, how did you engage your board in the development of AI strategy and the role in governance? I think that's key to simplify things for the board. And really what it comes down to, this is again the auditor coming out of me, is aligning risk with risk mitigation. And there's a lot of perceived risk. There's a lot of conversation amongst the news outlets and all over the internet to describe all of these large risks that come along with AI. And what I encourage you to do is to be able to present those and then speak eloquently to why your organization has mitigated for the risks that you know your board members are coming across and that are probably in the back of their mind that they may not actually be speaking about in any of the meetings or as you come across that risk governance perspective.
Kirk, let's start for the areas where you've actually seen some effectiveness. When you started, where did you see the most immediate internal opportunities inside the bank, and where did you execute?
Yeah, and I would define that as personal productivity. Every single one of us does something every day that AI can simply do better. I use this example often, and Cory laughs because he just thinks I'm a redneck that was born in Louisiana and now lives in Tennessee, which is partially true. But I own a backhoe. We have a farm here in rural West Tennessee. We have shovels out there at that barn, and I have a backhoe in the barn. If I need to dig a hole or knock a tree down, I could do all those things with a shovel. I'm pretty convinced of it. I've never tried because we have a backhoe. The backhoe is simply going to be faster, more accurate, and it's going to allow me to do more. And so AI is simply that. So personal productivity, I think, is the immediate gain. The eventual gain is what I like to call enterprise productivity. So for instance, we've got a credit administration officer that puts together a really robust asset quality report for the board every month. That thing is a beast. And historically, we'd pull information out of BA, out of our core. We would then go and have to aggregate that, put it on Excel spreadsheets. Every once in a while, there was mistakes or errors. We basically used AI to create an automated asset quality report that every single month is going to pull the data, format it. We even built a process to check that data before that data is released. So instead of my credit administration officer spending the better part of 2 to 4 days, just depending upon if there was errors with the system, of putting that report together, not only is he able to simply come in after the first day of the month and that report just simply exists, he goes and looks at the audit trail to make sure that everything was tracked over. He built a nice, robust deposit report for the board, and we're building upon that. So again, I think the most powerful thing that AI can do is simply make you, in other words, me, do what I do, but do it more accurately, do more, and do it faster. And I've seen that in my own personal job, to be honest with you.
Excellent. Cory, many community banks are not going to build their own large language model or hire a data science team. How should they evaluate AI features from the existing vendors that are available, core providers and fintechs that are probably knocking on their door regularly?
Yeah, and just to make sure that we're all on the same page, I like to break things down as far as possible. When you said LLMs, we're talking about the chat GPTs or the co-pilots of the world, just to make sure we're all level setting. As far as evaluating AI features, my primary response is be wary. Just about every single vendor right now has these transformational AI capabilities that they're talking about with their products. But a lot of them just slapped an AI sticker on a glorified chatbot. Maybe that chatbot got really good to have a conversation with you, but really what you want to do is you really want to understand what those AI features are and do they align with that strategic plan that Kurt was talking about earlier. So we can go off and we can chase AI across every single system, every single vendor that we're working with, because every single one of them will tell you they're using AI. But really to think about where is it that our investment makes the most sense and where is it that within our governance structure we can manage the next layer of AI that we're bringing into the organization. One thing that I would really caution the entire group on, especially the board, as we're talking about some of these larger investments that might need to be made, we're talking about contracts that are likely longer than the value that will be provided by a lot of these AI tools. So Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he had a session where with actually Michelle Bowman earlier in 2025, and he was basically saying, "Look, I struggle to project out 6 months based on this pace of change. Things are moving even faster now, but if the CEO of OpenAI struggles to see where AI is going to be impacting us 6 months from now, the odds are your management, you, and your vendors are also going to struggle to understand exactly where things can be 6 months, 12 months, 24 months from now." So while I say that, it's critical to make sure that we have a plan. We're all working on a path that may deviate off that path. We may switch gears, whatever it would be. But that when we're thinking about our investments and the vendors and the providers that we're bringing in, that we're thinking about whether they can scale with us across that period of time, or whether what they're doing is they're selling a product that is going to very quickly be outdated and potentially be overrun by several other providers that may do additional response or additional roles for you that could be better off.
As you were going through that process, Kirk, did you look at the cost as an ongoing cost, as Cory's putting together, that's going to continue to change, and as a result, you're going to have to? It's not I bought a building and I'm going to have that building forever. It is I've built this tool, and this tool may, on a regular basis, need to be reinvested in. Is that part of your investment strategy with regards to your AI plans?
Yeah, absolutely. We, of course, as community bankers, look at everything through the lens of efficiency. To me, you had these intangible cost savings, time savings that we were going to receive, and we've actually tried to figure out a way to track that. And then you've got actual tangible savings, vendor replacement theory earlier that I mentioned. We're tracking both. I think it was July, I think we started this heavily in April is when we started our second user group. So I would say that we really unleashed it. We had 1,790 man hours saved through the AI tools that we had put into place in that time frame. What is that worth? I struggle with telling you what truly that's worth, but it is a nice thing, an intangible result. And then we have tangible savings where we have already taken out about 4 vendors that provided us some solution that we no longer need because we built our own. And so there were some new things. We built a CRM for our wealth management division. We had never had a CRM. We built it in about 2.5 weeks. Pretty robust, looks great. So yeah, I think we track our expenses across the entire platform, not just our model expenses, but our data infrastructure expenses within our governance process, and we're reporting that every month. But to be honest with you, the overall cost in our system versus the savings is negligible. It's a no-brainer, if that makes sense.
You also just raised a really interesting point in that there is a lot of conversation about how AI will change your personnel and your infrastructure from a human standpoint. You just highlighted that the bigger impact to date that the ones you pointed out was how it affected what vendors you're using, as opposed to what does Susie do and how does Susie's job change. Susie's job still may change because she's using a new tool, but Susie's still there. And I know that is often a conversation of, I've got people, I want to keep my people engaged and busy with stuff that they want to and need to do. And your point about it's not just the savings of people, it's also
one of the questions in the chat was, is it replacing existing roles or making efficient roles more efficient? I would answer that. Every organization's different. I'm just answering for my organization. We, from an executive senior management level, went into this process with the belief, and we communicated to our staff that we're not eliminating positions. We're not going to get rid of anybody because of the efficiency gains that we're receiving. There is a lot of fear out there just from fear mongering, I believe, that AI is going to replace operational positions and this. There probably are organizations that are looking at that. We didn't. We're a growing organization. What I will say is that we are looking hard at, some of the old models. For instance, commercial portfolio management. There used to be a rule of thumb. You need one of these commercial portfolio managers for this amount of loans. That paradigm has changed, and it's changed greatly. And so, do I think it's going to impact the number of people we're going to need to employ as we grow? Absolutely. But are we going to get rid of anyone because of this technology? We're not.
Cory, you might have more insight on this because seeing other banks, but from what I'm reading, the where personnel has been impacted, it's where you have in-house operations as opposed to using third-party service providers, because there's many more repetitive functions that AI can replace as opposed to when you're using a service provider. For instance, Fiserv may be putting a ton of AI tools in their background because they've got a multitude of repeatable items that is not in Kirk's shop, even though he's using that tool. Is that something you're saying, is that the degree of impact on personnel also is impacted by the degree of operational work that's done actually inside your bank as opposed to using third-party servicers?
Yeah, I would probably say that it, again, just like Kirk said, it depends on how you want to utilize AI. I have two banks that I've talked to in the last probably 5 days that are looking at future builds or future purchases of products from their vendors that they've put on pause. Not necessarily because they feel like they can entirely replace it, or because they're looking to actually build something themselves, but because they want to start to evaluate some of the functionality of AI and how they can get that direct dollar return on investment type of impact back from it. When it comes to the impact on people, one of the things that Kirk mentioned is something I hear everybody that I come across saying, especially in community banking. We care about our people in community banking. We support our communities. I have an unbelievable passion for what community banks do in the markets that they serve. And so the idea of all this noise coming from outside that people are getting laid off because of AI, and there's layoffs from all of the big companies, Microsoft, OpenAI, whatever you want to call that, that outside pressure on your people as you're internally starting to talk about AI and really proliferating the messaging within your organization that there's a cultural shift to AI, they can really have a major impact on your people. And so it's got to be a focus of your entire organization, not just something that's thrown onto IT or anywhere else, in order to make sure that you're managing the impact on your people appropriately.
Good point. A question just came in, Kirk, that I think is very interesting in how it's stated. If an organization does not have some failed use cases, are they going to find a real opportunity to transform the organization? I don't know that when you started this that you saw things that were failing. You saw things that were working but could be improved, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, everybody's journey is going to be different. We were in a really good position where we had really good staff, really in all areas. We're a growing bank, really in all areas: loans, deposits, treasury management, wealth, mortgage. It really wasn't anything failed. It was more, we're going to continue to grow, and hiring good people, finding good people, training good people, keeping people on staff. That's a real issue in community banking. We all know that. That's obviously a big portion of this, but the other side of it was, just to be honest with you, I'm tired of every time a new regulation or a new rule comes out, we've got to go hire a vendor and pay them $25,000 to manage this one regulation. And every time the administration changed, it seemed like we got new regulations. And so I just got tired of the paradigm. And my aha moment was when I realized that this could be a simple game changer for community banks. One of the reasons why I'm convinced we have so much merger activity, especially in the community bank space, outside of succession planning, is efficiency. If you can't scale your bank big enough to pay for the cost of all these vendors, you have no option other eventually than to just sell and let somebody else do it. I'm not here to make a play on community banks versus regional banks or national banks, but every one of these banks has a purpose. Community banks serves huge purposes in rural communities in this country. And if they're going to survive, to be honest with you, I see this as being one of the biggest game changers in my almost 30-year career that's come about, is simple using AI to become more efficient.
As you're going through an execution, there's an education that has to happen. You mentioned early on that there were two people, not including yourself, that knew something about AI up front. As you're implementing these strategies, how do you put together the education program and get people comfortable that with using these tools?
Yeah, for us, it's a good question. We needed help. We needed somebody that understands AI a little bit better, what it is and what it's not. And to me, early on in my study, I basically focused on what it is, what's possible, what it can do. I never really learned or addressed what it's not. So again, this is where your trusted advisor comes in. We chose Cory. He was our CPA for the bank. I had a lot of respect for him because he helped us in many ways, obviously for years with Crow. The fact that he was a Florida Gator fan was a humongous strike against him, but we overcame that. The other things that we did is we strategically decided our course, our path for employee education. I think too many times AI sometimes starts from the middle of an organization and it's being pushed upwards. I hear that a lot from my peers. I think sometimes it's started from the bottom of the organization and it's pushed up through middle management. To us, it has to start from the top. So the very first thing we did is we brought our executive team together. I'm going to give Cory this benefit too. He wanted the executive team to get together, our chairman, our president, our CFO, our COO, our chief banking officer. We were going to be the first people that got in there and got trained and learned what it is and what it isn't. And so that allowed us as executive management to get comfortable with AI and to create some personal time efficiency so that then we can spend that free time training our reports and pushing it down to our different levels. The next thing we did is we divided our staff up into two groups. And I'll go ahead and tell you I made a mistake at this, and I'll tell you at the end why I did. Two groups. Group two were the individuals we felt would be heavy users. I saw a question in here about what areas are we seeing the highest results from. And group two was operations, credit administration, commercial lending, marketing, accounting, more operational and task. That was our group two that we put together. And of course, group three is heavy retail, some operations, but heavy retail. When we split these groups, and we have not trained group three yet, group three against retail mostly, we basically split it into 3 sessions. Each session is about a week apart, and each session is about an hour and a half, and it's specifically designed, Cory helped us put this together, to deal with someone's perception of AI over time, give them what we thought they needed when they needed it, to at the end of this come out best equipped to be able to use it. The first thing we did was a 1.5-hour session with Cory where he's just explaining what AI is. How do we communicate with it? How do you talk to it? How do you personalize it? What is it not? What's its failures? What is it not going to do well for you? That was a good introductory session. Session 2, unfortunately, is led by me, and it's all about our governance system. I'm really, really proud of our proprietary governance system. but basically we led session 2, which is by far the most boring training of these these 3 trainings, just simply about governance, how our model works, and then strategy. How are we going to use this? And then session 3 is the first time our people get their hands on AI. So the first 2 sessions, they don't have AI, they can't get into it, they don't know what it is. Session 3, Cory does hands-on application. He walks them through how to personalize it, again, how to communicate with it. He helps them build a use case, and he helps them build a project so they know how to interact with it. So after those 3 sessions, we have a staff that's fully integrated and can now start with that personal efficiency journey. I keep going back to that. To me, everybody in our bank has a full-time job. Nobody has downtime. They don't have time to play with AI. They need to get in there to start, create some personal efficiencies before we start putting them on some project work and some vendor replacement. And so where I messed up is I underestimated my user groups. So I have seen some real great use cases come out of retail. For instance, several months ago, we had a teller that approved a check. It was clearly outside of our policy. We should have never made that decision. The check that was presented was a fictitious check. The routing number didn't exist. The bank didn't exist. If that retail staff member, through a project that we would have had to have created a user skill in there, would have simply scanned that check and just asked it, hey, bounce this off my policy, tell me what you see. AI would have immediately come back and said, hey, that routing number doesn't exist. The bank doesn't exist. This is against your policy. We looked at the past transactions for the last 90 days for this customer and saw this well exceeds any deposit that they've received. And oh, by the way, policy requires this. That's where I messed up and didn't probably think through or train all of our staff quickly enough. So overall, I think you've got a well-designed program, and Cory helped us do that. Go ahead, Cory.
Yeah, Kirk, I want to go back to, I was going to ask you that question about talking about the teller and that check fraud that you came across. But what I want to talk a little bit about is on the front end, the conversations we had were, well, retail doesn't really need to be part of this whole process. And then just by having the experience of being in the platforms and understanding how they work for yourself, for the different company or organization parts that you have, like that's what got you to think, hey, a teller should have been able to leverage AI here. And so that use case, it wasn't spawned because somebody came across your desk and said, hey, AI can solve this problem. And then that's the first time you jumped into AI. You started to build the foundation. The organization as a whole is starting to understand that AI can support us. And so it's not falling on 1 to 5 people's shoulders. The culture is starting to shift, and I think that's pretty cool. One question that I just saw pop up, I'm shocked at how active this Q&A is. So if you have any other questions, I love seeing everything coming in. We're trying to answer it as fast as possible. But please go drop your questions there. Kirk, so one of the questions was around RPA, so robotics process automation. At its core, what that really is it's saying, okay, well, historically with AI, we've had bots that do things for us, just to really simplify it as far as possible. And so one of the questions was, did you really intertwine AI with, I'm going to call it just bots instead of RPA? And I think part of that needs to be clarified is we're talking about generative AI. So we're talking about the types of platforms that you go to and it generates content, as opposed to this automation, this machine learning type of bot process, just to try not to overstate what it does. So how did you intertwine what you've been doing in the past when it comes to AI with what AI is now on the generative side?
Yeah, you're stretching me here. So I will say that our process is metastasizing. Once we tackle a project and realize what's possible, that leads us to multiple generations of ideas of either improving what we created or that process or improving other areas. One of the things that we're struggling with now in our governance process, we really have 4 branches off our governance model, where each one of these branches is working on process improvements as communication across those different platforms. So, the funny thing, what you said earlier that I did say was 3 months ago, that retail really aren't going to use this. I see no applications for them.
Yep.
Whereas today I see that it clearly can impact really every person in the bank. I don't know that within my career that we're going to think of everything that we're going to do or use this for. I don't think I've answered your question, but I will tell you that we are constantly, almost on a daily basis, having conversations about what are we going to do next, how are we going to get there, what do we need to get there, what resources, and so forth.
Hey, great
Well,
question.
I wouldn't be doing you any favors, Kirk, unless I threw you off your game by dropping something that's beyond your LSU education. But what I wanted to highlight with everything that he just said is that yes, if you start to dive into how all of your infrastructure has ever been built with anything related to AI, and you're trying to make sure you're continuing to build on everything else with this next step into generative. I just see a lot of organizations being too hesitant or pausing too quickly. And so for me, I think the key is start getting motion in place when it comes to generative AI, and how it impacts some of your other already in place technology is something that'll come along. And I do want to go back real quick, Sal, and then I'll let you jump back in. But there was a question that said that Black Hat, which is a vendor, had a briefing on a growing AI risk area where multiple agents are working together, and asked if we could speak to that piece. Very, very briefly, I'll talk about that. Risk needs to be managed based on where it is that we're implementing our controls. We have within banking an outrageous number of controls in place to mitigate some of the risks that are being posed to us. And so we need to make sure that as we're integrating our AI opportunities into the workflows we have, we need to be thinking about how do controls need to be modified.
Cory, I'm going to let your system catch up and hit Kirk with a quick question. Kirk, as you're loading up your AI tools and getting them ready to execute on it, one of the key concerns is that once I use a AI tool, that data that I made available to my AI tool can be out there in the world. How do you control that, and what are where does that risk get addressed?
Yeah, I would say several things. Clear and present risk, something that I question constantly. I will say this: we use a lot of platforms that have confidential data. Our core processor, CRMs. We approach that the same way we did our core, the same way we do our CRM, is vendor management, third-party risk management. I'm going to update you later on one of these questions later. I had a conversation with the Federal Reserve AI guru just last week, and he spoke to this greatly about the need for robust third-party management systems. We took a hard look at the model that we chose. We subscribed at an enterprise level and felt comfortable with the fact that our system was not allowing the model to learn. Now, again, is it a risk? It's a risk, just like dealing with our core processor. They've got a massive amount of confidential information. A data breach there could be catastrophic, just like this AI model could as well. So we feel comfortable that our third-party risk management was robust, that we vetted this vendor. But again, this vendor is no different than any other vendor that handles our confidential information, in my mind.
So as your people get more comfortable using AI tools, they may decide to use Gemini in order to get answers or any other one. What has been communicated to your team, or have you put any locks on your internet that preclude the use of other AI tools, all done in the effort of doing a better job, not necessarily to do something evil, but for instance, I put up all my commercial customers' data in, and I ask it to squeeze all the numbers so that I can figure out if there are any risks in their financial statements. Good use of the tool, except that you just don't want that information out there in the world. How do you control what your people are using the tool, other tools, or accessing
Yeah.
them?
Internally, our IT team has put locks on any unapproved AI platform that they access from their workstations. Of course, we've clearly communicated to them that there's one tool that's available to them, one tool that's provided. All information has to go into that tool. The next thing that we did, and it's way over my head, but we created a master skill within our tool that anytime someone's using our AI model within their workstation in an approved format, it's testing against our four governance principles, and it's tracking every single chat, every single use case, so that in the end, examiner, regulator, auditor comes in, asks us a question. Hey, how are you controlling this? Not only are we controlling it, not only did we send an email out and say, hey, don't do this, we've got a record of everything that's been done. And so now one of the things that I do want to bring up from that conversation with the Federal Reserve AI guru last week was one of the things I really have thought about, but I didn't take action on. I'm immediately going to take action now. The three things that he gave me: number one, do a great job with your governance process. I think we're there. Number two, have a robust third-party risk management process. Vet your vendors, not only your model vendor, but your data infrastructure vendors. Make sure you do a great job there. I feel comfortable there. One of the things that he didn't mention is there are, I don't even know what you'd call them other than ancillary AI models. For instance, customer sends me over an email that has a personal financial statement. I open it, it's a PDF, and Adobe comes up, and the very first thing that Adobe says is, hey, would you like me to summarize this document? We have not yet figured out how within those platforms to turn off those AI options. So we're just at this point telling people, hey, do not utilize this, do not click this. The Adobe one even has on there, hey, your AI team has vetted this and approved your use of it. Yeah, so ancillary software systems, Microsoft does it, Adobe does it. I'm sure we can all come up with ideas. To be honest with you, that's my biggest concern today and the biggest threat to us.
There was a question out there about bias in the model that might generate a wrong answer. I assume that people are still part of the process, and there's still someone evaluating what comes out of the model. That it isn't the model generates and we run with it. So
Right.
there's still the brains part of this, that to make sure it makes sense.
Yeah, we like to call that hallucination. Cory can fill in this better. It's going to happen. I would say not in every chat. There's some hallucination. A lot of the times when we're having a chat or having a communication and we didn't provide enough context, AI is trying to give you what it thinks you want. So if you don't give enough context, it's going to give you something that could be false. It could be incorrect. So the number one thing we do is we train everybody. Don't trust it. Everything that's produced, we're reading every word. Our commercial portfolio management division is producing packages at a rapid pace. We make our commercial portfolio managers and our loan officers responsible for the output. They need to read every word, make sure that it's what they wanted to be put in there. And then we don't, and I'm training them to do this. We don't go back within the model and ask it to make those changes because it may hallucinate somewhere else. We take that product out, that Word document, we paste it here, and we make changes, and that's our final product, if that makes sense. But does it happen? Yes. A guy told me a long time ago, and everybody's heard this saying, that perfect is the enemy of great. AI is not perfect. But I think if you use it correctly and you use it cautiously, it can be great.
Corey, as we
Yeah,
wrap, go ahead. I'm sorry.
just on that note, very quickly, I'm a firm believer that people are going to go find the tools that are going to make their lives easier. And so we have a role as leaders in an organization to put the tools to make our people effective in front of them. And so if we decide we're going to put up walls and hold off on allowing anybody to get to AI, they're going to get to it. They're already using it on their phones. They're already using it probably through different channels, as far as you can just go to Google and just an AI mode search and then start to have a conversation with it there. And so what we need to do is we need to be educating our people. We need to be having that enablement so that they know how to get what they're looking for out of the tools. And then as far as just the hallucination side of things, I just go back to our internal controls that we have in place. We should be allowing our people to come up with conclusions and trust AI. But as an auditor, we trust but verify. And so we need to make sure that we've got those internal controls in place where risk is at a level that we need to mitigate it.
Corey, in closing, we got directors who now have got an earful on what can be done. What should they be approaching management in the next 30, 60 days to put a bug in their ear or ask about with regards to our AI and use of AI?
So I think there's probably three questions that I would target you at, because if I give you a ton of other things, it's going to be too much. But the three questions I'd really focus on are: do we have the right talent at the organization that's going to carry us on this AI journey? And where is it necessary to upskill leadership? Because there's no way almost any organization has all of the people in place to guide you along in this journey. So the first one's talent. The second one would be, just like Kirk's been reiterating, do we have the data infrastructure to support all of the opportunities that are going to be presented by AI? So we've got talent, we've got data, and then do we have the ability to manage risk and govern AI as it really starts to sprawl throughout the organization? What are the channels that we have to be able to continue to manage, whether we're using it in Adobe and we don't really know that we are, and assessing the risk. So really talent, data, and risk management, I think, are the three key areas I'd focus you on.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. As a reminder, in the next 24 hours, you'll receive this in an email form, and so that you can review it over and over again and marvel in the LSU and Florida conversation. Also would like to remind you that we have the Bank Board Forum, where AI conversation will be part of the conversation, as well as many other topics that you might find interesting. Please note that there's a QR code here that will allow for a $400 off of the standard rate. Thank you again, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully you will participate in other webinars directed by Bank Director. Have a great day.